Yes, we've written quite a lot about dogs in our fact file, which is our archive of newsletter items, and in our Ask John Mackay site, our question and answer site. We've had a few questions about dogs. So I've just got a few examples there, but do have a look on both of those sites and you'll see some quite interesting things that we've written over the years that have been discovered about dogs. And of course, with the genome revolution over the last couple of decades, the genetics of dogs has been investigated. And the interesting thing is that dogs, because of all of that variation that you've got, as you saw with Glenn's presentation there, dogs have been used by the evolutionists as an example of evolution in action. But if we look at that a little bit closer, we can see that it's not actually any such thing. So this was a question that was sent into the Ask site, to the question and answer site. Dogs have undergone many changes since people have been breeding them. Surely this is evolution. Well, the quick answer to that is yes, the changes are real. However, this is not evolution, and that's something that's a sort of continual theme with us at Creation Research. There's lots of change in the scriptures, and lots of change in the world out there that we can observe, but none of that is evolution. Change is very real. The world has changed, but it hasn't evolved. So let's have a look at dogs. Now, this was a story that we wrote about back in 2007, and the actual heading of the article that we saw on the University of Manchester News was that St. Bernard's study casts doubt on creationism. The author of this article was trying to use changes that had been observed in St. Bernard's, very large dog, over 120 years since the breed was first defined. There have been a few changes, and you could see that in this collection of skulls that a scientist had studied. And what they found is that compared with the original breed, the modern dogs had a few features. They had broader skulls, they had more pronounced ridges over their eyes, and a steeper angle between the nose and the forehead. Now, you saw the variation in Glenn's presentation there, huge variation that you can get in the size and shapes, but within the same structure, as it were. So this is certainly a change, but it's hardly evolution because the St. Bernards are still the same dog. And this was a comment that was made by one of the scientists from the University of Manchester. These changes are exactly those features described as desirable in the breed standard. Now, notice that. How did those changes come about? They are real. Right? And he went on to say they are clearly not due to other factors such as general growth, and they provide the animal with no physical advantage. That's true. So we can be confident they have evolved, but notice what he says, purely through selective considerations of breeders. So what's happening here? It is selection. Now, we've all been trained in the general world these days to think of selection as being part of evolution. But selection is real, but it's not evolution. And this was a further comment in that same article. Creationism is the belief that all living organisms were created according to Genesis in 6 days by intelligent design, and rejects the scientific theories of natural selection and evolution. Well, we do reject the theory of evolution, but we do not reject natural selection. That is a real process. But notice the way they try to conflate those two things. Then they went on to say that this research once again demonstrates how selection, whether natural or in this case artificially influenced by man, is a fundamental driving force behind the evolution of life on the planet. So by going from a small change or a few small changes about eye ridges and the angle of the dog's nose, they have suddenly decided they have evidence for the evolution of life on the planet. Now, to me, that's rather a large quantum leap. However, the change is real and the selection is real, and that's an important point when we look at dogs these days. Dogs have certainly changed due to selection, but think about what selection means as just a plain English word, right? To select things means that you just choose between already existing options. The dogs themselves remain the same species. So there's no evolution. They're still the same species and certainly the same kind. But let's go back to the selection. Is it necessarily good for the dogs? Because evolution is supposed to be a process where things are improving. They're getting bigger, better, more complex, or improving. But what has selection done for dogs? Well, sometimes not a lot of good. Here's an example of some of the genetic studies that have been done on distinctive dog breeds over the last few years. A study of 19 short-legged breeds. Now, by that we include dachshunds, corgis, Pekingese, basset hounds. And this study found that they had an extra gene for a growth factor called fibroblast growth factor 4. Now, you don't need to know that. Now, you would think, oh, well, having an extra gene, surely that's evolution. Surely that's better for it. But having an extra growth factor just means that you get the wrong areas of tissue stimulated at the wrong times. And even though this sounds like it should make the dog bigger, in fact, it results in the deformity of the bones. And it results in something called chondrodysplasia. Now, if you think that sounds like a disease, you are right. If it occurred in any other animal, and it does, it is called a disease. But in these dogs, it's actually part of the breed standard. Now, they didn't realize when they identified the breeds or set out the breed standard that it has to have certain features, that it was because of this particular gene, but they've found it in all of those breeds that have these distinctive short legs as part of their breed standard. That's the standard that's defined by the authorities who say whether this dog is a true pedigree dog or whether it's just a mutt or a mungle or a bitzer or whatever you like to call a mixed breed dog, right? Now, this has become such a problem, not just in legs, but in all sorts of other aspects of dogs, that it has come to the notice of the secular media. And back in 2008, in fact, the BBC made a documentary about what terrible mutations have done to these very, very distinctive, highly bred pedigreed dogs. And this was a comment that was made by a vet who worked for the RSPCA, that's a Society for the Protection of Animals. And he said, when I watch Crufts, that's a highly respected dog show in the UK, but it's the same all over the world. There are these dog shows where people bring their highly bred dogs. And this vet made the comment, what I see is a parade of mutants. It's some freakish, garish beauty pageant that has nothing, frankly, to do with health and welfare. We have become completely and utterly desensitized to the fact that breeding these deformed, disabled, disease-prone animals is either shocking or abnormal. And that is a good point, that a disease can be built into the breed standard. In other words, this dog does not fit the particular breed unless it has a disease. Now, that is, to me, with my medical background, that's totally counterintuitive, that you should want something to have a disease built into it. But also, I think vets would agree with that as well. And people who really, truly love dogs would say that as well. Now, since then, there has been a bit of a revolution in trying to eliminate some of these very serious diseases in the very, very highly inbred dogs, but they are still there and still in the breed standards. So we do have lots of distinctive changes in structure and in functions, and as Glenn said, in temperament and personality. That's just as much a feature of distinctive dog breeds as their size and shape and colouring and other such things. But all of these distinctive breeds all have their drawback, these very highly bred ones. So with the Dachshunds, of course, you have the problem with the short legs, which means that the whole body is very low slung, so they have lots of problems with their spine as well as with their joints. The one in the middle there is a pug dog, which have a flattened face. Bulldogs have the same thing as well. Now, that means that they can't breathe properly, and so that decreases their exercise tolerance and makes them prone to respiratory infections and infections in the folds of the skin as well. And even big, tough-looking dogs like the boxer, they are prone to heart disease and to joint problems. And the Dalmatian at the bottom there has an interesting problem. They have a problem with uric acid. Now, people, or some people, have a problem with uric acid, and it gives you a terrible disease called gout. And Dalmatian dogs have that same problem, and they can get gout, which is a terrible disease, causes dreadful arthritis, and it also causes kidney stones and bladder stones. So do have a look in our fact file and on our Ask site, and you will find all sorts of interesting things about dogs, including some other genetic studies. There's no point in repeating them over and over again. The principle is the same. When we've looked for distinctive features of all of these dog breeds, quite often we find mutations and disease-causing processes. We certainly do not find evolution.